Hi, here at the shop we have a lot of rules and philosophies that we follow to ensure that we do a good and thorough job when repairing our customers' equipment. One of the most important philosophies is the way we approach repairs on every single model. The way I categorize that, or the way that I look at that is, and if you've been to our website you will have seen this, it's what I call the 10 most common things that go wrong. Like all manufactured items, certain models from certain time periods have certain inherent problems. And so the way I have always approached this is every single model of NuTone Intercom ever made has a list of the 10 most common things that go wrong. And what's on that list will vary over time depending on which model it is and how the models and how the equipment ages. So for instance, here we have a customer's IM3303. This is from 1994 or 1995. And the things that would have been on the 10 most common list back when this set was maybe 3 or 4 years old is different than what it is today, since now it's approaching 21 or 22 years old. The other rule that we follow here is that time changes everything. As equipment ages, new problems show up. Sometimes they're wear and tear problems from use, sometimes they're design problems, sometimes they're just problems from the natural aging of the electronics. So today at the shop is one of those days where we're re-evaluating problems that we've started to see trends or patterns with over the last year or so. Over the past year, we've started to see more problems and have more complaints from customers about the control switches on their IM and IMA3303s. To show you what those are about, I'm working on this customer's IM3303, so I have it put together, but it's out of the faceplate. And the problem that we're seeing and the problem that people are reporting have to do with the switches on the main board. This is the microcontroller board, and this board sits right behind the front of the faceplate right in here. So the buttons that you press to operate the master station, you have program off, AM, FM, CD tape, auxiliary. These are the different inputs. You have your 6 buttons for your AM and FM preset radio stations, and then your 3 intercom controls. You have inside patio talk, door talk, and end call. When you push one of these little white button caps, what you're actually doing is you're pushing these little switches that are soldered onto the board. And the problems that people are reporting is that they're having a hard time operating the system because the little switches aren't working correctly. For instance, this particular one, the customer reported, along with other regular problems that 3303s have, is that the inside patio talk button doesn't always work, and also she has a hard time turning the radio off using the program off button. And we know in this case that it's not a general electronic problem with the remote music control function of the master station, because you can always turn the music or the radio on and off from a remote station, and you can change stations from a remote station. So it's not a problem with that. It's actually a problem with these little switches. So here you can see these are the little switches that I'm talking about, and you can only see some of them because I wanted to zoom in close enough so you could actually see them. So this is the program off switch, and then this is the AM and the FM, and then there's 4 more down below. And then on this side we have preset memory location 1, 2, 3, and so forth, and the intercom switches are down below. So these are what are referred to as tactile switches. They're little tiny switches. They measure 6 millimeters by 6 millimeters, and they sit up off the board. It's about 4.5 millimeters thick, and these type of switches are used in all types of consumer electronics nowadays, whether it's your intercom system or the buttons on your car radio or the buttons on your DVD player or the buttons on your toaster oven. They're used in lots and lots and lots of different products because they're small and compact. They have a reasonably long life. In looking up information about these, I would not expect these to be a problem. Generally speaking, the most common of these type of switches that you can buy, they have a lifespan of around 100,000 pushes. And I really don't think that this customer has pushed her radio off button 100,000 times in the last 20 or so years. So it may just be that some of these sets, maybe the switches that they chose to use in these models were not of the best quality, or perhaps it was a batch that wasn't very good. And when you say it was a batch, you know, a batch of tactile switches from a manufacturer, that could be 100,000 switches. So they get spread around a whole lot. Another set of switches, so now you can see all of the switches on the board. There are actually 3 up here. These are your manual tuning and scan tuning ones up here by the display. And then we have the 2 long rows, the 3 intercom ones down here. And then there are also these 5 which are behind the flip down door on the right hand side of the faceplate. And this is time set, hours, minutes, memory to program your radio stations, and then the power reset button. So altogether we have a total of 2, 4, 6, 12, 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, 23 tactile switches. And there are actually 2 different styles of switches in a 3303. And what we're contemplating here at the shop is this becoming a regular enough problem that it's something that should be addressed on every single 3303 that comes through the shop to prevent those sets from coming back again for some small minor problem after the majority of the big problems have been repaired. Because you can imagine we've had customers report that the time set button works and the hour button will work, but they can't set the minutes, or they can't set the hours, or the memory set button doesn't work and they can't program their radio stations, or the radio stations can be programmed, but when you go back to push the memory button, some of them don't work. I have another one right now. I think it's memory number 3 or 4. You have to push it a lot of times to make it actually connect, and it's just not right. So if you do get it programmed finally, then accessing it is a problem. So let me show you the problems with this one. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the radio on. And we'll turn this down a little bit. Okay, so we're on FM memory 6, and we can go up to memory 5 or 2. The memory buttons seem to work okay, but when I push the program off button, it's as I push it, you can feel it go thunk, 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 thunk as it clicks in and out. And see, I pushed it 5 or 6 times before it actually shut the radio off. So if we turn it back on, we can probably repeat that. It's actually, I know you can't hear it, but it's actually clicking, and so I pushed it 4 times before it actually shut off. If you push it once and then push it really, really hard, it will usually work every time, but that's a good indication that the switch is failing. And also, you don't want to have to push the buttons on the front of the faceplate really hard all the time, because what that will do over time is the button pushes the switch is soldered to the circuit board, and if you're pushing it really, really hard, and when I say really, really hard, it's like you're pushing it so hard that your thumbnail turns white, over time you'll crack the solder joints that hold the switch to the other side of the board, and then you'll have an intermittent solder connection, and that's bad. The other thing that this one does is the inside patio talk button, I'm pushing it and it's not connecting. If I do door talk, you can hear the relays click and the end call is okay, but the inside patio talk, no good. Now if I hold the board, because it's kind of floating around here, and I push it really hard, I can make it work. But if you just push it normally, it's not working. So that's a problem, because it means the intercom won't work reliably, and if the intercom doesn't work reliably, people will stop using the system. So this is something that needs to be addressed. We have to think about what we're going to do. It's a lot of switches altogether. It would be a measurable amount of extra work to do it on every single set, so we have to figure out whether we're just going to do it all as a matter of course or whether we're going to pick and choose. And picking and choosing can be a dangerous thing to do in the repair business, because if you pick or choose poorly, then you may leave a problem and then the customer gets a setback, and 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months later, another one that you didn't change out starts to act up, and then you've got a problem. Like most things that we do here, odds are they're all going to get changed out. So let's take a look at the two different styles and how these go in. So here are our two styles of tactile switches, and these are both single pole, single throw switches, which means essentially it has one set of contacts inside the switch. The switch is in the normally open position, no contact through the switch, and so the button moves only in one direction to close the contacts. One of the things you might notice, other than obviously this one has a white cap on it and this one has a blue cap on it, and interestingly enough, on some models of IM3303s, the button caps on the original switches, some of them are black and some of them are gray. So I think that means they may have come from different vendors. There are no marks on the switches, so we don't know who made them originally. So we tried to source good quality switches from our regular supplier, and both of these switches have a rating of, I think the white one is 100,000 operations, and I think the blue one is like 150,000 operations. The other difference between these are, this one, if you tip it up, it has 2 legs, and they're in the center on each side. And the blue one, if we tip it up, you'll see it has 4 legs, 2 on each corner on each side. So you might think that, well, this is obviously a single pole switch because it's just 2 contacts, and this one must be a double pole switch, but that's not the way it is. So let's go ahead and look at how the internal switching works on each of these. So here's a schematic drawing of the internal switching for each of the switch. So the 2-leg switch with the white button cap, you have two contact points. You have leg number 1 and leg number 2, and internally, when you push the button, it closes the switch and connects the number 1 terminal and the number 2 terminal together. In the blue cap switch, it's a little different because you have contacts 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there's a connection in the circuit that can come in, connect to pin 1, and it continues through the switch to pin 3 and then goes somewhere else. The same thing is true with 2 and 4. It can be tied to something, it goes through and goes out of 4, and then the switch is here in the center, so when you push the button it closes the switch and it makes a connection between 2 and 4 and 1 and 3. So it's still a single pole because it's only one switch contact inside, and it's a single throw because it's only one button push. So that's some of the newfound problems with IM3303s. And now we have to decide how we're going to address that. These are important things to consider when you're in the repair business, because when you work on a customer's equipment, for the most part, if you do a thorough job, you don't want to see that unit again for maybe another 10 or 15 years. You certainly don't want it coming back in a few months because some 35-cent switch failed on you. And these are important things to keep up on trends of failures. I remember 4 or 5 years ago when we started to see a lot of failures with the audio intercom relays in IM and IMA3303s, and I remember when we made the decision that we would change the relays as a matter of course on every single set that came through. And surprisingly enough, it was about a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, I had a set come back in that it's from a dealer for one of their customers, and it was actually the very last IM3306 that went through the shop prior to having relays changed out as a matter of course. And yes, it came back because the relays had become faulty and it didn't operate correctly, and in my mind that proves out that we made the right decision. So we took care of that for that customer, and we haven't had any problems with relays since we've been changing them out. So that's a little bit of the look of the day-to-day decision making when you operate an authorized NuTone service center. Harvey is back. He was on a retreat. And Harvey, if you haven't met him before, Harvey's a hedgehog. He's our shop mascot, and he's also our YouTube aficionado and the producer of all of our videos. Harvey, as always, has his placard, and he would like you to subscribe. And he's pointed out to me that we've been negligent in not asking people to subscribe, and also he's going to do a video shortly that helps show you how to subscribe, because he thinks a lot of people aren't really clear on how to do that. There will be a little placard at the end of this video right after that shows you here how to do that. But Harvey would appreciate it if, one, you would give this video a thumbs up if you found it interesting and helpful, and if you would subscribe to our channel, Harvey and I would appreciate it. So that's all for today. See you on the next video.